The medical community is simply overwhelmed with the number of diseases that need cures, management, support, community, and more recently, immediate responsiveness with the onset and continuation of a global pandemic. COVID-19, still prevalent with the threat of the variant strains, remains a challenge for all of us locally and globally and continues to overtax our medical system. But what about those diseases that are less known? How do individuals cope with the limited information to manage their situation while working in tandem with the overstressed medical community? And what if the disease that needs management and potentially a cure has afflicted your own children? In 1954, one father, Frank Ficarra, faced this very issue. Two of his young children were diagnosed with a rare blood disease, Cooley's anemia, also known as thalassemia major. So Frank Ficarra began organizing neighborhood blood drives to make sure that his children and others like them would have the precious blood they needed to survive. Although these blood drives were successful, Frank Ficarra realized that much more was needed. Frank gathered the parents of other Cooley's anemia patients in the back of his Brooklyn butcher shop to form what would later become Cooley's Anemia Foundation. Thalassemia is an inherited blood disorder that reduces the production of functional hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen. This causes a shortage of red blood cells and low levels of oxygen in the bloodstream, leading to a variety of health problems. A side note here, thalassemia is actually a group of blood disorders that vary, including thalassemia alpha, beta, intermedia, minor, E beta, sickle beta, and thalassemia major, which is the most severe, to name some, and I'm sure our guests will really shed some light on this very serious disease. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. Because of Frank's foresight, Cooley's Anemia Foundation has grown into a national and international force with an extraordinary record of accomplishments. The foundation established the first fellowship program for thalassemia research and has become a strong voice in Washington for thalassemia patients and their families. To continue his legacy, Frank Ficarra's son, Robert, serves as Cooley's Anemia Foundation's Vice President of International Affairs and continues work his father began on an international scale, reaching out to patients in every corner of the globe where medical knowledge and supplies are lacking. What began as the story of one man's family is today the story of many families working together toward a common goal: better treatments and a cure for a disease which threatens our most precious resource, our children. I am so very excited to introduce my guest today, National Executive Director Craig Butler, who has been involved with the foundation since 2001, and former National Director of Patient Services, current board member, and a certified genetic counselor, and on the faculty of Joan H. Marks Graduate Program in Human Genetics at Sarah Lawrence College, Radhika Sao. So let's get started. Welcome, Craig and Radhika. Share your passion about Cooley's Anemia Foundation and how you became involved. So who wants to start?
I'll jump in just to say thank you, Laura, so much. We can't tell you how much we appreciate this opportunity to get to talk about not just the foundation, but about thalassemia, the blood disorder that we fight. It's not a very well-known disorder, particularly in the United States, but it's one which is of great importance to those families that are affected by it. And we do like to let people know about it, especially because many people in the United States that don't know about thalassemia may come from a background in which thalassemia is especially represented. And it's important for them to know because they may, without knowing it, be trait carriers. And so one of the things that we definitely want to do today is to talk about what it means if you have thalassemia trait and what backgrounds that tends to affect and what you might want to do about it. But before we get into all of that, why don't I let Radhika say hello too?
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Radhika.
Thank you so much again for allowing Craig and I to join you today and speak about the Cooley's Anemia Foundation. Thalassemia, while not super common in the United States, is an important condition to be aware of. There's a lot of people who carry the trait and do not realize that they are trait carriers and can have children affected with it. But not only that, I know from when I worked at the foundation, we only know of a small number of patients. And based upon statistics, there are more out there that we may not have just connected with. And so if this allows us to reach even one more patient, one more family, that can make all the difference in the world. Because when you're out there and you're by yourself and you feel no one understands your struggle, or you're searching for the proper care and management for your child, and you're like, no one knows about this orphan condition, finding something like the Cooley's Anemia Foundation is like, the light at the end of the tunnel, because so many resources the foundation can provide, doctors to reach out to, how to manage it, help with, insurance and getting medication. And more even than that, the social aspect, meeting other
For
patients and
sure.
families, because that will just help that isolation, and that support makes such a difference, especially when you have families of young children who don't know what the future holds and they are overwhelmed maybe with the diagnosis and what that can mean, and foresee a future for their child that may not be accurate.
Well, it's clear that you all provide hope because prior to 1954 and Frank Ficarra's effort in this way, I'm not even sure the history, whether it was either known or kids just got sick and they didn't survive. How did you get involved, and where did your passion for this come from?
I got involved in a very mundane way. 20 years ago, I was looking for a new job. I opened up the New York Times, which is what you did back then. I saw that there was this small foundation in Flushing, New York at that time that was looking for a communications director, and that was the work that I was doing then. I applied. I had never heard of Cooley's anemia in my entire life. And within a few days of being there, I knew this was where I wanted to be, because this is an incredible foundation. Like a lot of small foundations that are medically or health oriented, it was founded by patients and parents, particularly parents in the early days. The board has continued to be made up of a lot of parents and patients and other family members, as well as some people that don't have a direct connection to the disorder. But because of that, there is an intense love that is involved in the whole proceeding. Everyone that's on the board really wants to make sure that the foundation is doing exceptional work, and their dedication and commitment and heart comes through so quickly that I fell in love with the foundation and I never want to leave.
So my story is a little different than Craig's because I have a family history of thalassemia. In fact, I had an older brother who passed away from thalassemia major 3 months before I was born. And I was also diagnosed with thalassemia major. I've lived with this disease my whole life, and I had known about the Cooley's Anemia Foundation. My father had gotten connected when we moved to New York to the Suffolk County chapter. I was actually working as a genetic counselor, and was calling the foundation to set up an appointment for something called the SQUID test. It's a specialized exam that's done to measure iron in the body, right? I spoke to someone named Eileen Scott, who's still there, and she was doing patient services at the time. And I said, literally on a whim, I said, by the way, not only am I a patient, but I'm a genetic counselor as well. I have some of your brochures here, and I think, it might benefit from a little updating, and I might be able to assist you. So if ever you need some help, I'd be happy to help. So she says, well, actually, our director of patient services position is empty right now, and we're looking for someone to fill it. Do you think you might be interested? She said, give me your fax number. Yes, this is the time we still did faxes, and I'll fax it over to you. This was a position they always like to have a patient to be in, because who knows more about what patients need than another patient. I got the job, and that's when I met Craig. So I've known Craig since, I think, 2002, right? You started in 2001, and I met Craig the following year. and we've been friends ever since. So it's kind of funny. I only got to work for the foundation for a few years, and then my path went elsewhere. But I've always tried to stay connected and do whatever I can to continue to build awareness and advocacy. Now I'm on the board of directors, and now Craig and I like to do our little duo and try to help spread the word together. And like Craig said, it's driven by the families and the patients. So the foundation always has our best interest in heart. There's no like outside influences, and we get to have a big say in what gets done.
You're an advocacy organization and you're also a research organization. And so therefore you want to meet the interests of the folks who are most impacted. But Radhika, I want to tell you, I'm so sorry for your family's loss and for yours. And so grateful at the same time that out of that really came your contribution, both as a genetic counselor, but also a huge contributor to the foundation. And regardless of not being in the role of patient services, you understand what that role requires. And so I'm sure that it benefits Craig as well, because as you're looking into what is in the best interest, how do you do a needs assessment for the folks you're serving? That's the perfect place to go. And it sounds like your board is filled with folks who have both personal and professional engagement in the arena of Cooley's anemia, which I'd like to learn more about. And I don't know which direction you want to go, but I'd love to know about what the foundation really focuses on in terms of research and programmatic, but also about the disease itself. Because as I was doing research in my introduction, there were so many variations. And my only personal experience, which is completely minimal, which I think a lot of people go through, is during my adolescence, I was anemic for a period of time and couldn't donate blood and had to be on medication. So I'd love to learn more.
So I'm happy to talk to you more about the condition. And then Craig, of course, can definitely give you a lot of insight into how the foundation is working towards, research and cure and management. You were very correct in that thalassemia is a type of hemoglobinopathy. And when you say hemoglobinopathy, it's a condition where the hemoglobin is impacted. The red blood cells in our body is responsible for carrying oxygen from the lungs to the tissues, and that's how our body can stay alive and function. Hemoglobin is specifically the molecule that does this. It has reversible binding capacity. Two chains are alpha and two chains are non-alpha, but the most prevalent one is the beta chains. Alpha thalassemia is a very different condition than Cooley's anemia because that one happens when alpha chains are deleted. But when we talk about thalassemia, that is similar to like in the same family, I should say, as sickle cell disease and hemoglobin E and all that, because they all affect the beta chains. With sickle cell, the beta chain, it's made, but it's made in an unusual way. So it cannot transport oxygen efficiently. And then it gets blocked in the smaller capillaries and it causes what are crises and pain, which we know are typical for sickle cell. That's very different than what you see with beta thalassemia, which is what Cooley's anemia is. Beta thalassemia occurs when you either have one or two genes that just don't function. So you're not able to make the chain. With the beta thalassemias, you mentioned there are three types. There's minor, which is we like to call trait. Minor is a very antiquated term now. So you can have thalassemia trait, you can have intermediate, or you can have thalassemia major. When you have thalassemia trait, that means only one of your genes is working, right? Because you get one from mom and one from dad. So that means one copy is not functioning well. But the good thing is when you have 50%, that's enough. That's enough. But people with thalassemia trait do tend to be, like you said, anemic. So they're a little anemic, but you can't really do anything about it, right? You can't take iron, you can't take any medication. It's just the way your body is. So people just learn to adapt and they realize that sometimes I'm going to feel a little tired. For women, it can be more of an issue because of menstruation and all that. But most people with thalassemia trait have no medical issues or anything. It's just like if they do have a lot of blood loss from, say, an accident or something like that, then they may need a transfusion, but that would be very rare and very specific. With intermediate, what happens is you have a mutation that allows you to make just a little bit of the beta chain. So you're not functioning normally, but you're not making none. You're making just a little bit. They don't tend to need transfusions regularly, but they will improve their quality of life. With thalassemia major, Both genes make nothing, no beta chains, nothing. When you're born, you still have a lot of fetal hemoglobin. It's what's made when you're in utero. And that by 6 months of age is all gone. It just slowly starts being made less as the beta chain is supposed to be made more. So that's why most people with thal major come to medical attention before a year of life because they're not able to make and they become more and more anemic. So people with thalassemia major require blood transfusions to live. That's it. The blood cells last for 120 days, right? Or red blood cells. And then after 120 days, the spleen destroys it. And the iron, which is in your red blood cells, gets recycled into making a new red blood cell. But if your body doesn't make it, right, and you're getting all this excess red blood cells coming in, you're going to build up iron, like the heart and in the liver and in the endocrine organs. So while transfusions are life-saving, they also can be life-limiting because they cause secondary complications. And so that then requires another type of management called chelation to remove the excess iron. If you have a person who's diagnosed with thalassemia major, stay there 1 year. You don't treat them, they don't survive more than a couple of years. They will die. If you treat them just with transfusions, they can live into their teens and early 20s, but they don't live beyond that because the iron builds up so much in the heart, liver, and in the other organs, you have end organ damage from that. And most people would die of heart failure. But now, if you do the chelation properly and you get rid of the iron, now you can live as long as you keep up with your blood transfusions and you keep your iron levels down. Then you can be like me. I'm 46 years old and I have thalassemia major. As long as I can get my blood transfusion, I'm good. But it's important to recognize that this country we're very lucky to be living where we are. There are many regions of the world where blood is not as accessible. And if you need a blood transfusion, you have to get someone to donate the blood for you. It's a quid pro quo. You have to provide it, or you have to, if you need it from the bank, someone has to replace it. If you ever look at our Facebook pages and all that from other patients, anytime people donate blood, we're so grateful because it is truly, and Craig will tell you this, the gift of life. We always say that at the foundation. Blood is our gift of life. You make us able to survive.
You've shared so much rich information, but the first thing I want to do is dedicate this podcast to blood donors.
Exactly.
Let's do a blood drive right now. Like, right? I mean, it's so important. And then I'd love to ask a couple follow-up questions. How often does one, generally speaking, need blood transfusions and then the chelation therapy to manage the heavy doses of iron?
So blood transfusions will vary based on generally your size. So when I was a child, when I first got my first one, I couldn't even get a whole unit of blood because I was tiny. You're a little infant, right? So infants get like a half a unit or whatever. It can go every 2 or 3 months. As you get older, you need it more often. So I'll give you, for instance, briefly, my story is when I first got it, it was exactly that. I think I got my first transfusion, maybe I was 18 months old because they wait for it to get to a certain lowness before they'll do it. Maybe it was 4 weeks in elementary school, 3 weeks when I got to high school. And then when I got out of college, I was going every 2 weeks. And that's been more or less what I'm at. And with the chelation therapy, that's not started immediately when you start the transfusions because you haven't built up anything yet, right? So it's usually started, I would say, about a year or so after. And again, you have to do certain tests to see that you're starting to build up a level. Like anything else, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So you don't want to deplete someone's iron stores too much by starting it before they need it. So once it gets to a certain level, they start to begin the chelation therapy. And just to give you an example, a healthy person unaffected with thalassemia, your iron level should be, I believe, under 200. Thalassemia, what they do is once you hit 1,000, then they generally want you to start it. But there are people out there, because they don't chelate, they can go into the tens of thousands. If you can imagine how much iron that is in your body. People don't miss their blood transfusions because you don't feel good, right? You're tired, you're lethargic. No one ever misses a blood transfusion. The problem with the chelation therapy is you don't feel the difference. You don't realize what it's doing. I always tell people it's like when people smoke. So no disrespect to anyone who smokes. You don't know the damage it's doing to you until it's too late.
If someone waits too long, is the damage to those organs irreparable? Can that damage be reduced or reversed with the removal of iron?
There have been people who were really in bad shape who've come back. Craig knows a few people were thinking of that. We were shocked. Literally, it was night and day, the transformation, and they learned the lesson. You know, the problem with chelation therapy is up until recently, it was an injected drug. So it's not a quick one shot and done. It was an infused drug that had to be put in your abdomen, thighs, or your upper arms with an infused pump. And it took 8 to 10 hours. So most people do it at night, right? You go to sleep with it on. What do you think happens when kids become teenagers? They don't want to do it. They never do it. They become really, really, really non compliant. And what ends up happening is then they get into really bad shape. They start getting complications, and they have no choice but to make up for lost time. But unfortunately, I've known several people because they were non-compliant as teenagers, it's damaged their endocrine organs. And then they had issues with fertility later on. That's why we work at the foundation to talk and try to educate people. Listen, you have to know your disease and you have to understand how to manage it. You have to take care of yourself. And if you don't, the fertility you can't fix. Once you damage certain organs, they don't come back. Like for instance, if someone becomes diabetic, that you can't get back. The heart can get better, which is great because that's the number one cause of death. The liver can get better, right? They can. You can't reverse diabetes. You cannot reverse fertility issues. You know, we try to get people early before they get to that. And one thing I do want to mention, which is, again, I'm going to give a lot of props to Craig and the foundation for this, is that in the last, I would say 10, 12 years, there finally is an oral chelator, a medication you could take by mouth. It's a pill. Game changer. So now instead of having to inject yourself every night and have this infusion, you just have to pop a couple pills and it does the same thing. I remember growing up, that's all I said. I said, I can deal with the transfusions because it's not every day. Just give me something instead of the chelation. But the ironic thing is, those kids now who never had the infusions complain about the tablets. And I always tell Craig, I ask Craig, he'll tell you this. I tell him, I said, let him talk to me. I'm going to give him my old pump. Say, I give you 1 week, and you'll be begging me to go back to the pills because it's a very hard thing to have to stick yourself every night. But because the foundation worked really hard, having the fact that there's a pill formulation is such a big game changer. It changed everyone's quality of life. You could travel, you could do so much more. You didn't have to write a letter explaining why you're taking needles and syringes with you on a plane. You can just take your tablets and go. You could do so much now. And people, especially those who had, like me, taken the infusion, I had been using it for 32 years when the oral chelators finally came out. And I was like, yes, please. And guess what? You have a bunch of people who became more compliant because the method of it was that much easier.
I just want to point out the first option that Radhika was mentioning, the infusion drug, was not available widely until the 70s, which meant there were many, many years where there was no way of getting the iron out of the system. And for those people that didn't even have the benefit of the infusion, it really had a huge impact on the length of their lives. You know, we would typically lose patients in their teen years. You know, if they had a less severe form, they could live into their 20s or maybe 30s, but we would hardly ever get anyone beyond that. And since the advent of chelation medications, we have seen a tremendous growth in the length of life and an improvement in quality of life. Several years ago, we started giving out our 50-plus medals to patients that had reached 50 years of age, and we have many that are even beyond that. So even though the first chelator was an ordeal and was in some ways inhumane, it did make a huge difference and allowed a lot of people to stay alive and healthy until an alternative was available.
Thank you, Craig, for mentioning that. He brings up a good point because that's the reason my brother is not alive. That's the reason I'm here and he's not. That one drug. That drug came out when I was 5. By happenstance, my aunt went to the National Institutes of Health and saw an ad looking for families who have children with thalassemia major to start on this drug trial. Told my mom, said, you get her down here. And that's how I got on the drug trial. And at that time, no one knew if you could even do it that young, at a 5-year-old. But as Craig said, it made all the difference in the world. I think it's great that Craig gives out medals for 50. So I'm getting mine in 4 years. And then Craig needs to start a new medal because there are some, I know 2 or 3 in the area that are over 60.
Absolutely.
Right. And I can't wait till we get some in the 70s. I mean, I want some real cranky older patients. But the game changer is because of the advocacy of the foundation.
Let's move to that programmatically, because I know that there has been efforts and accomplishments through the foundation. So I'd love for you to speak to that. And then maybe outside of advocacy, the other pieces that Cooley's Anemia Foundation supports.
We have for a long time, as I believe you mentioned in your introduction, you mentioned that we have had a long time medical research program at the foundation. And that's because very soon after the foundation was founded and after they started getting, their blood drives going, the founders and the people that were involved took a look and said, what else do we need to be doing? We're getting blood for our patients, we're getting blood for our kids, this is great, but what needs to happen next? And early on, one of the things that they decided was that, this is a rare disease. And let me back up for just a minute, because I don't think we may not have actually clarified for people what we're talking about here. In the United States, on our registry, which is the people that have come to us or that we have reached out to, we have a little over 1,400 people in the United States on our registry. Our estimate is that there are probably between 2,000 and 3,000 people that have a severe form of thalassemia in the United States. Our founders knew that, this was not going to be a disease that the medical research community was going to necessarily be jumping into. Certainly, if you're a pharma company, you look at, and at that time they may have thought there probably were only a few hundred patients in the United States. It's not a big incentive for you to do something. So we early on said, you know what, we need to set aside some money, raise some money, set it aside to fund medical research. And so we began a medical fellowship program geared toward early career investigators with both the idea of, well, let's see about the kind of research that they can come up with, and by funding them, let's hope that they will then have an interest in staying in thalassemia. So it had both the benefit of getting valuable research out there and of interesting some doctors to stay in there. And we've been very, very fortunate to have that happen. So we do fund medical research every year. Initially, it was a fellowship program where the fellowships were for 2 years each. We still continue that program, but several years ago, we also initiated a clinical research grant that we offer when there's something that comes up that's in an early stage clinical trial that we feel would be beneficial. And we also, when there is an appropriate application, we do sometimes give out research in the gene therapy field. As you mentioned, I started 20 years ago. And when I started at that time, there was a lot of talk about gene therapy. There had been, unfortunately, in some other disease states, there had been some very unfortunate consequences of a couple of gene therapy trials. And as a result, the field was kind of moribund. But the researchers that our foundation was speaking with really felt that thalassemia was one where there could be some significant promise in gene therapy. We felt that it was worth investing in. So we, 20 years ago, were saying, let's see what we can do about gene therapy. Just to, again, to give an idea of how long these things take, there has been a lot of progress in gene therapy for thalassemia now, to the point where a company has developed a gene therapy process which in the European Union has been approved for use in thalassemia, and which we are hoping will be submitted to the FDA and gain approval to the United States. But that has taken 20 years to get us from the point of this is, really potential to the possibility of it becoming a reality in the United States. There have been gene therapy trials, clinical trials in the US, which have shown some very promising results.
You have incredible foresight to have 20 years ago thought that's an area to invest in, because I certainly know through cancer research, gene therapy has been sort of taken off. And of course, that's a completely different disease modality, but gene therapy is one way to address it. I wonder, do you also have global numbers? Because you mentioned early on that globally this is a bigger issue because of the lack of information and knowledge and your efforts to educate folks. And I didn't know if their global numbers were much larger.
Typically it's said that there are around 300,000 thalassemia patients worldwide. And again, that is considered to be probably a big undercount.
According to the World Health Organization, I think they say between 5 to 7 of the world's population are carriers of either like thalassemia or sickle cell or some type of what I call hemoglobinopathy. So I definitely think that's a gross underestimate. And I think the problem is you have a lot of countries that are developing that do not have the statistics. It all has to do with populations. So thalassemia is very common in certain ethnic backgrounds. So if you look at the ethnic backgrounds in the United States, it's still a lot of people who are of white European background, right? You have Hispanic, you have Black, but the populations where thalassemia trait, again, we're speaking specifically about beta, is very common, is in the people who originate from the Mediterranean region, Italy, Greece, Turkey, but the Middle East, so Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, right? So Southern Asia, so India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and then you have Eastern Asia. So if you add up all of those populations and you consider them in the United States, they're a smaller fraction of the whole. It makes sense that there's not as enough, but if there is 300 million people in the United States, it's totally, there's no way there's only 1,400 people with beta thalassemia. And it's not the fault of the foundation. It's the fact that people just don't know we exist. Or maybe, like I said, in these little pockets where they're all on their own. So in a place like India, because thalassemia is very prevalent there, a lot of people are carriers, a lot of people have it, they know about it, but the resources are limited. Here we have the resources because we have insurance, we have chelators we have different alternatives, we have the blood supply that's, not always in great shape, but we have it. There's always blood available. What's interesting to note is on the East Coast, there's a lot less patients. On the West Coast, where you have more immigration from Eastern Asia, a little bit more of a population. The other issue is that, there are certain countries and certain cultures where they don't speak about this stuff. Because I'm of Indian descent, so arranged marriage is still something that happens, right? Or if it's not an arranged marriage, it's an arranged meeting. That's very common in a lot of the Middle Eastern and Southern Indian cultures. No one wants to, make it known that their child is carrying a trait, right? Thalassemia trait. If you are someone with the full-blown disease, you may be deemed less marriageable. So there's a lot of secrecy, unfortunately. Like, it's funny, in my family, my mom's side has been very open about it. My dad's side, not so much. So it wasn't until I went away to college and my dad had no choice but to tell my older cousins, hey, she's going to be going to be near you. Keep an eye on her if she needs something. I have nieces and nephews that, thank God, I started being more vocal about it once I started working at the foundation. I got the courage to accept my own self. And we can all say that things are different now than they were 20 years ago. People are much more open about things, right? But if I hadn't been open and I hadn't told my nieces and nephews, they wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have known that they're at risk for being carriers because it runs in our family. Because obviously it runs on both my mom's side and my dad's side. And a few of them are. And I'm like, you need to know this, and you need to make sure your partner's tested so that you know if you're at risk. What you do with that information is your choice, but you need to be aware. That's why we work really hard. Craig is relentless in trying to make sure we have every opportunity to get our information out there.
I imagine you're totally correct in that the numbers of folks are underestimated in terms of those who are connected to the foundation. And I think it's true for other cultures, certainly in the French Canadian or the Jewish culture around Tay-Sachs. So I have that in my family, but I didn't know anything about it, didn't even know about the possibility of genetic testing, had no clue. And so until you educate folks on what their options are, they can't make informed choices. So I love that the foundation has that as an area of focus and work outside of research and fellowship and the medical component. I'd love to hear sort of a rundown of sort of how you operate, how you publicize things, how you get the word out.
What is it that the foundation does other than medical research? Well, like a lot of small medical foundations, we kind of have a three-pronged approach. One of them is medical research, as we've talked about. One of them is patient services, and then one of them is communications. And in terms of patient services, we offer a whole range of things. One of the most important things that we do, and which we've been doing for several years now, is to offer an annual patient family conference. We get together some of the expert doctors from around the country to come in and to give up-to-date, valuable information that can impact the optimal health outcomes for our patients. We also always have a patient panel where patients get up there and talk about their own experiences with having thalassemia. We have group sessions, and we also have a social component. But this is a vital way for our patients to get together. And because it is a small group of people across the United States and is often very spread out, this is a great opportunity for people to get together with other people with thalassemia. In some places, a person is the only person with thalassemia in their whole community, their whole city, their whole state possibility. And even though social media provides a great way of connecting with people, there's actually nothing like actually being in the same room with someone. So this is one of the most important things that we do. We also have a brilliant patient services staff. Radhika mentioned Eileen Scott, who's our patient services manager. We also have a senior director of medical affairs and an on-staff social worker, all of whom work directly with our patients in helping them find the information that they need in order to live more fully with thalassemia. The biggest thing that we do is just give them information and the ability to speak to people who have experience with this disorder.
This episode is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, please reach out to us. To see all the small but mighty organizations we featured, check out our incredible infographics in the stories section of the Intrinsic Group website. Are you all ready for the quick and gutsy questions?
Sure.
Why not, right? What is at the top of the wish list, of your wish list for Cooley's Anemia Foundation? However, the answer can't be money or funding.
The very top of my list would be a cure, but if we were talking about something that's a little more immediate or a little more practical, I would really like to have in the United States and around the world a much larger pool of hematologists that work with adult patients in the benign setting, in other words, not for cancer. But most hematologists who are dealing with adult patients don't have a lot of experience with thalassemia at all. And as our patient population has become older, it's become more important for us to have hematologists that work with adult patients.
What a great new advocacy or continuing advocacy piece for the foundation, because you have an aging population in the most positive way.
What I would love for the foundation is for somehow there to be a greater connection with the blood banks, because I never want to hear a patient saying, I can't get blood. That can be in two ways. A can be because there's a shortage, but it can also be because the blood banks don't always understand that you cannot let us drop to the same level a healthy person can drop. Hemoglobin in an adult should be between 13 and 16. All right. The best time to transfuse a patient is when they drop down to 10 because it's not too low and they can still function. And that's where a thalassemia trait person tends to be. The blood banks typically will not transfuse you unless your hemoglobin is a 7. So let me explain to you, when you have a 7, you can't climb up a flight of stairs without getting winded. You have a constant headache. You are lethargic. So how am I supposed to function with a hemoglobin of 7? And you want me to go like this, like a roller coaster every week? When I say I want a better connection with the blood banks, it's too often that on Facebook, someone says they won't transfuse me. I have to keep fighting. They say my count is too high. And even a few weeks ago, and I'm in New York, and we have a lot of hematologists here that understand thalassemia. My hematologist had to fight with the blood bank because they were like, no, we're at a lull. We don't have a lot of blood. We'll give you 1 unit because my count was like 9.8. And they're like, no, she can just get 1. We'll give you 1. We don't even want to give you 1. It's still too high. He's like, absolutely not. You are not giving her 1 unit. She needs 2. This is not a person who can create the blood on her own if you give her time. She will get worse. That frustrates me that we're still having these arguments. And you have to go to the director of the blood bank, and it cannot, there's not enough receptivity to listening to it. They feel like we know what we're talking about. And I said, you're right. For the general population, no argument. But if you have an inherited blood disorder, you can't do this to people.
Wow, it's so amazing because you would think that they would realize that this is life-threatening when it gets below a certain level and dysfunctional. There's a level of dysfunction. And I wonder, and Craig, you've probably already thought of this anyway, but wouldn't it be interesting to invite, even online, all of those blood bank directors to your conference? Whether they come or not, get them on your radar, because I think that level of education may shift their thinking. There's a disconnect from what I'm hearing between all the things they have to do, and I'm giving them credit for managing a blood bank and the ups and downs of that, and yet to put thalassemia, Cooley's anemia, in that category of urgency is important rather than as, in the general population, as you pointed out. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and it would be great to make that more of a streamlined relationship, if possible. Next question. You guys ready? We got on a tangent, but it was super important, I think. If you were to think of a song that describes your organization, what would it be?
Unfortunately, for some people, I'm a huge musical theater fan, so I immediately go to Broadway songs, and I would pick, there's a song from a show from the 1970s called Seesaw, and the song is, "It's not where you start, it's where you finish." And I would pick that because not just about the foundation, but also about our patients, that we may have started out in 1954 as a very small, incredibly small foundation, and we are still not a large foundation, but we have accomplished a lot over that time, and when we finish, we will have accomplished an incredible amount. And I think of it applying to our patients as well, because they started out with so few options and such really unfortunate outcomes, and now the future for our patients, if they can maintain treatment, is much, much brighter.
That's a hard question. I guess it'd be "I'm a Survivor" by Beyonce. I think of myself as that sometimes. I'm a survivor. I'm not going to give up. The foundation has had hardships over the years, when you don't have enough funding and you don't have enough people and all that, especially for me, because my brother passed and I'm the one that survived, right? And I think every time, we hear someone that passes away, but you're still standing, you're still the survivor. And I'm going to work harder. I'm not going to give up, and the foundation's like that too, because it's interesting. I happened to join the board of directors, and it just worked out that way during the pandemic. And I'm hearing about all the, the concerns, the finances, like, okay, we're what are we going to do? We can't do things the way we normally did. And we are obviously not alone in that. Everybody struggled during the pandemic, but we're still standing and we're still surviving. And we were able to do a lot. The people that work for the foundation don't tend to leave. Craig is a lifer. Sophia is our friend. Sophia is a lifer. Eileen is a lifer. There are people that have been with the foundation. They get in and they don't leave. They're lifers. They survive. They keep going at it. It also makes me think about, what is it, Sister Sledge, We Are Family? Because that's how we are when it's to one of another patient. And we call each other, you're my blood sister, you're my blood brother. And people are like, aren't always siblings like blood related? I'm like, no, you don't get it. There's a whole other, you're my vampire family.
I love the songs you picked, and the Survivor, the I'm a Survivor one is also you're representing all the folks who are continually battling to survive. So I love that. And We Are Family is great. It's perfect. I love it. Those are great. What makes your organization gutsy? How is Cooley's Anemia Foundation gutsy? Because it's definitely gutsy.
Because we don't let our size intimidate us.
That's a beautiful answer. I love it. Yeah, we're small and we're super gutsy. We are not laying low for this. We are fighting hard.
I agree with Craig, and I think it's the paradigm that the foundation utilizes in making sure that patients are always first, and making sure what, like you said, do a needs assessment. What do the patients needs? Because that's the top of our priority list. It's not what they think the foundation needs. It's not what Craig is like, well, I feel like this is what we should focus on. No, it's what is the pressing needs of the patients now? Craig always has the patient in his crosshairs, as opposed to, let's get to that end result faster. Because if you just focus on the end result, you're not going to help people along the way. And instead we're going to always have that in mind. That is what we eventually want to get to. But what can we do in the now? What can we do in the present that's going to help? Goal setting is important, but you need to live in the moment, and you need to know what's happening now and focus on that. And it makes such a world of difference.
What is something outsiders, or maybe even some insiders, don't know about Cooley's Anemia Foundation?
I think that most people don't know that, most people don't even know who we are, but most people don't know that a lot of the work that we do for our patients benefits them as well. For example, because the safety of the blood supply is so important to us, our efforts to make sure that the blood supply is safety benefits everyone.
God, Craig, that was you needed to have a longer answer so I could think. I think people don't necessarily realize how few people do so much. I guess that's what I would say, because the staff at the foundation is very small. I think Craig, full-time employees do you even have 10?
Not full-time, no.
You don't even have 10 full-time employees taking care of a national foundation, doing so much. I mean, you would think, because when they've gone to Washington to advocate for funding and all this stuff, and for getting going to the FDA to get drugs approved, you would think it's a big foundation that's able to make those things happen. But it's not. But what's important is, while there may be only a few people who are physically full-time employees, the board is very big, and you have the board of directors, because like I said, I recently joined, is what, 30, 35? 43 on the board of directors. I don't know if they're typically that big. And with those 43 come all their family and their friends who are then part of the deal. So if Craig's like, okay, I need some help, we're going to look into this, you suddenly have a plethora of people jumping on the back. How can I help? What can I do?
True, most organizations of your size do not have such a large board, but for you, it almost replaces in some way a volunteer program or a network, because your board members really serve that purpose in a beautiful way. So I think you've created a system that allows you to really focus on your mission and your vision through that network. And you've done a beautiful job being able to do that. If you all could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about Cooley's Anemia Foundation, who might that be?
I'd like to get Dwayne Johnson, mainly because he's very big right now. People like him. He has a very friendly and accessible, attitude, and I think that he would be someone that people would identify with. But I would also say, on a kind of a secondary note, because you mentioned just influencers, I would love it if we could get, and I'm not talking about famous people here, but Radhika mentioned the various communities that are affected by thalassemia, and I would just love to get some, non-celebrity influencers from those communities that would be able to reach out and help us make inroads into making sure that, members of their community know about thalassemia.
Gosh, that's a really great question, because you don't want someone political, because that can go backwards on you. It's funny that that Craig mentioned Dwayne Johnson, because my husband is a wrestling fan and I always watch them, and I have no choice. It's on in my house. I go, they should donate blood. Do you see how big their veins are?
I love it.
It would have to be Tom Brady. As a New Yorker, I cannot like him, but everybody knows who he is. So I don't know if that's going to go over as well as I'd like it to. But I remember back in the day, this is really dating myself, Andre Agassi, I think it was him. I believe it was him. He has thalassemia trait. And I was like, can you talk about it more?
I have one other quick question, which is, what is the best way for people to reach you?
So if they are just looking to get information and don't need to communicate, going to our website is the best first step, which is www. And I will spell this, thalassemia.org, which is THALASSEMIA.org. Or you can look us up at Cooley's Anemia Foundation on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And if they have any questions, you can email us at info@thalassemia.org.
Fabulous. So I just want to take a moment and thank each of you for being here with me and spending so much time, both educating me, and I'm not just talking about the pronunciation of your name, Radhika, I'm teasing, but really about a disease that has such keen, important management aspects to it, as well as the depth of the foundation, not just around medical research, but around advocacy, around support, around connection, around reducing shame and stigma, which we didn't talk about, but we talked around it a little bit, and being able to be survivors, and commendable to that you have a badge for someone who's getting to 50 and then hopefully 60 and hopefully 70 and maybe 80 as we continue to learn more and more about this disease. So I just want to thank you both for spending so much time with me. It was really informative, educational, and truly emotionally inspiring for me.
Well, thank you. We can't thank you enough for giving us the opportunity.
Yes, we definitely appreciate it so much. It's one of those things that I just wish more people knew about it. And so I'm always glad for the opportunity to just share information and hopefully reach more people. And like we said, even if we get one more family that hears about it through this way, or a hematologist or a nurse or someone in the field that says, hey, I think I know someone that could benefit from the foundation. Or an influencer, maybe Taylor Swift is going to listen to this and be like, hey, I should take care of them. Or,
Who knows?
Or I don't know, LeBron James, someone, I don't care who you are, but, it'd be great if we could just spread the word. And more importantly than that, give blood. Please, if nothing else, give blood. My Instagram feed is pretty much either my daughter or donating blood. That's all I ask.
It's something we should all, those of us who are healthy, should really be able to do, and should do it as much on a regular basis that we can, because it really does provide life, as you said in the very beginning, for somebody else. It's the gift of life, and beautifully said. And an hour of your time of donating is 6 hours of an infusion for somebody else.
You dedicated this podcast to them, and I'm so grateful for everyone who's ever donated blood, or at least attempted to donate blood. I know some people get turned away, but I'm so grateful whenever there's a blood drive, because it's important for people like me.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring a small and gutsy episode to keep it going, please reach out to me or buy us a coffee at www.buymeacoffee.com/small and gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, meaning we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my social media maven, Delania Tirado, my infographic creator extraordinaire, Sonia Fizek, Nate Addy for the exceptional logo, and all the friends and family who have guided and inspired me. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.